Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Thursday, June the 12th. I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Joined with me today, Doug Ross, Editorial Page Editor of The Times, and Times Assistant Managing Editor Crista Zivanovic. Plenty to get to. Let's start off in Hammond, where there's a bit of fireworks going on over, of all things, the Festival of the Lake's finances. And one of the councilmen, Chico Hinojosa, has kind of brought it up and is not satisfied with the answers he's gotten and wants to kind of take it a step further now.
Well, and basically he's right. He wants to know, where show me the money is what it comes up down to in terms of, how is the festival funded? Where's the money coming from? Security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's a councilman. He ought to be able to know those things, and frankly, so should the public.
And how much it cost? How much did the acts cost? How much did the security cost? What did everything cost? And I think everyone appreciates and understands Mayor McDermott's wanting to use this beautiful venue and have something nice for Hammond. And he said the better and bigger acts bring in crowds, they bring in money. But by the same token, you need to be accountable and let citizens know the truth behind it.
Yeah, transparency is something that that Mayor McDermott has kind of said he supports. So
now's your time.
yeah. Moving into South Lake County, there's a movement afoot of South Lake County communities with the E911 consolidation to kind of go their own way. Cherville voted last night to kind of follow its own path. St. John set to meet tonight. Where do you see that going?
Where I see it going is I see some state lawmakers who are going to say, look, you boneheads, we told you consolidation. Now you've got to consolidate. The law is a little fuzzy on can you have two public safety answering points, meaning call centers. But, the time has passed to be able to set one up. I mean, we're 6 months out.
And basically, if you read the law, it does seem to be clear that, yes, you can have two. Preferably the second one would be for like an IUN or a PUC. They're called PSAPs, yes, or an airport. But if you do have a second one, the idea is to have a location that might be dark, and if the main location goes down for whatever reason, you can have the second location to move to. Or if there are other towns that have it, they still are consolidated. There's just two locations. And I think Lake County officials have made it clear that, we're going to charge you if you want to use ours. And I recommend everyone read Sunday's paper. Dan Carden is looking into it. He's talking to authors of the 2008 bill that mandated that all 92 counties have a consolidated system to save money, to be uniform, to have more high-tech equipment. And Dan is looking into the interpretation of the law. So I think it'll be a good story on Sunday. And I think it's going to differ from what St. John, Cherville, and Cedar Lake officials, I think it will differ from their interpretation of the law.
Yeah, plenty to read about on this Friday as well with what St. John does tonight.
Yes.
So we'll be keeping an eye on that.
And Bill Dolan will have another story. I'm talking to Brian Hitchcock, who was hired to be the new E911 director, and talk about how hard it is to try and accommodate them, and that his understanding is they will be charged if they want to rent equipment from the county.
Right.
Indiana Supreme Court Chief Justice Brent Dixon announced that he's stepping down from his role as Chief Justice. He's going to stay on the court for now until his retirement, but he's stepping down to make room for someone else. Any thoughts on that? He's a Hobart native, so.
Well, he's a Hobart native, so there's a region voice on the court right now. Pretty powerful position for a couple of years until he stepped, announced his resignation from that role down into an associate justice. But here's the really interesting thing about all of this is there's going to be a huge public attention all around Indiana about the selection process for his replacement. And so, this goes through a merit commission, which is exactly what you have in Lake County. So, it'll show the rest of the state how well this works. So, hopefully there will be, sooner or later we'll get more visibility so that judges, throughout the state are chosen through this merit process rather than going through a crazy election and then having to say, are they, showing partiality towards someone who was a campaign donor, the merit selection process takes that out of the equation.
Right, and it does seem that those who are in place to choose the next Supreme Court justice, there are enough different people from different partisan, and parties and genders, so that it will ensure that someone of merit is chosen. And as far as the next Supreme Court Chief Justice, it could be Robert Rucker. He's from Gary. He's another region person who's been on the court for a while. But the problem is he's 67, so he's going to turn 75 soon as well. And the other three remaining are Mark Massa, Loretta Rush, and Stephen David, all three appointed between 2010 and 2012. But I think you do make a really good point about the merit system, I think, is the way to go.
And the Chief Justice doesn't have to be someone who's currently on the court. My guess is it's going to be. So we'll
For a
just
smoother
kind of
transition, exactly.
Now, Randy Shepard was in that position for years and years and years. So we're a little bit spoiled by seeing that, but there's no reason that they can't pick somebody who will hold the position for maybe 8 years, 5 years, and then we'll see after that.
Right.
Okay, and briefly before we end this week's episode, I just wanted to touch on kind of the fractious nature of the Republican Party this past week. We saw in Fort Wayne where the Indiana Republicans met, and there was a battle over gay marriage. Those opposed to gay marriage won, kept it in the party platform, much to the consternation of Republicans who would like to see a more inclusive Republican Party. And then nationally, we saw Eric Cantor, the House Majority Leader, defeated in a big surprise in Virginia in his congressional election. Are both of these indications that the kind of the right wing of the conservative wing of the Republican Party is kind of still holding sway?
Well, yes, and what it means is they're the ones who vote, and so those are the ones that people are listening to. Now, they vote in the primary, which is a separate issue of who's going to hold sway in the general election. We saw with Richard Murdoch running for Senate. He knocked out Dick Lugar in the primary in the U.S. Senate race, and then because he was so conservative, Murdoch. And frankly, he made that comment about a woman who was raped and conceived as a result.
And he made some additional news at the convention this weekend as well, comparing the U.S. debt to Nazism and
the economy in Nazi Germany before the rise of the
which
Nazis.
There was great inflation and all that compared to what we have now, but in the U.S. But he made his point. What's interesting about Cantor being kicked out is then that opens up the whole power structure, because he was the number two guy, and exactly, and so he was the second most powerful person.
He was expected to take over as House Speaker, possibly from John Boehner. Yeah. So
Howie Politics is reporting that Marlon Stutzman, who is a congressman from the Fort Wayne area, would like to become the majority whip. So he's the one. Whip meaning you got to round up all the votes, right? So fortunately, he doesn't actually use a whip, but that's a position that, if I recall, Mike Pence had, and so before Pence resigned to run for governor. So it's a pretty powerful position. I don't know what chance Stutzman has of getting that. But you got to remember that there's been a whole lot. We're here with Pete Blaszkiewicz as our congressman, but you go outside this district, and there's been a whole lot of turnover in the House. You'll see people who haven't been in there very long. Stutzman's only been in there a couple terms, but you can rise to power quickly.
And just one more thing to add: there has been some suggestion that Cantor didn't necessarily lose over his stand on immigration, and they pointed to Lindsey Graham winning in South Carolina, and he managed to beat back the strong conservative Tea Party element. So I don't know what you can draw at this point from that. Some people are suggesting that it just seems to be an out with the old, in with the new. Possibly. I think it bears watching before we really can see anything definitive.
Yeah. And each state has its own set of voters, so you're going to see things like that.
Right, and that's the tension for Republicans, is having to survive a primary where they are going to often get attacked from the right while making themselves still marketable enough for a general election.
Or
So,
vulnerable, too
yeah.
vulnerable, because
Yeah.
the person they end up choosing is just too far
Right.
too far right.
Well, that's all the time we have this week. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with another political roundtable.